Hello everybody, it's M. Welcome back to the Eternal Card Breakdown. We're going to be talking about Zhytrom Twisted Mind today. First things first though, a couple of announcements. We're going to be doing an Eternal stream on Saturday. Should be afternoon, I believe 1 p.m. PST, so stay tuned for that. We will definitely be running through all of the new spoilers on that stream, and then a video will be up on either Saturday evening or Sunday morning. So we'll be covering all of the spoilers from the new set, and hopefully we'll get to some brews as well. I'm hoping to run a nice long stream and getting back into some Eternal. We are definitely going to be returning to streaming on May 11th when all good stuff happens, and so really excited to see how that goes. Regardless, we do have an actual new free card today from Wednesday's release. Zhytrom Twisted Mind has come out as the promo, so if you finish out your chapter before the next Wednesday, then you'll get free copies of this particular card. Zhytrom is a 5-cost triple shadow 2/4 with Void Bound, and your other units have +1/-1. He also has the hero subtype, which is a relatively important thing to remember, since that basically just gives him some vulnerability and invulnerability from certain cards, namely the shadow card that kills non-heroes victimless crime. His summon ability is play a unit or spell from the enemy void, give it deadly, and take its cost in debt. So, let's talk a little bit about this thing. There are a lot of interesting things going on here. First off, the card does have Void Bound, so it is fairly difficult to recur in Shadow, but like in general, that's probably not going to be too much of an issue. Your other units have +1/-1 is mostly a drawback. It will kill any of your smaller tokens. It will make it difficult for some of your other units to have that level of survivability. In general, you can often value health a little bit higher than strength in some situations, but if you're playing into an aggressive deck that plays with a lot of like 3/2s or something like that, if you want to just be able to trade up, then that's something that actually will help you out in quite a lot of ways. However, it makes you more vulnerable to lightning storms, hailstorms, anything where you're dealing mass amounts of damage to small units. It also makes you more vulnerable to unpleasant trades, things like that. What it does do is give you a lot more of a clock when your units are being particularly aggressive, which can be particularly strong if you actually can get that going. The summon ability is probably the strongest reason to play Zhytrom. As a 2/4 for 5, he's not particularly elegantly costed for anything, particularly on that triple shadow influence, but the ability to grab any unit or spell from the enemy void and also give it deadly, which is a not minor bonus effect, while taking its cost only in debt, is just like really all extremely good things to do. So, for example, you can play Zhytrom Twisted Mind into a control deck, steal one of their Channel the Tempests, give it deadly to kill something that you might not otherwise be able to kill with a Channel the Tempest if you're on an empty hand, and then basically just have yourself in like 9 debt for a significant portion of the game, but that will just sort of automatically get paid off as time goes on. But even picking up like smaller cards, cards that deal damage like Piercing Shot or Lightning Storm that then have deadly and can kill an entire board, can make that really, really strong. And of course you can play larger units as well. Things with Quick Draw or Overwhelm always synergize really well with deadly. Any unit that has its own summon effect, you'll get that extra bonus. All of that's just really, really good stuff. The main drawback to this is that the card is not very flexible towards basically designing a plan. So if you have a big plan going on, or if you have a particular plan for your deck, Zhytrom is not necessarily going to contribute to that, because the unit or spell that you're playing from the enemy void is always going to be somewhat more random than whatever it is that you've got slotted in as your sort of basic idea. You want to be able to build stuff and get into like sort of like basically like build a deck that does a particular thing. Zhytrom is a card that adds a degree of randomness to what type of effects you're getting. You get your pick of the litter when it comes to your opponent's cards, and your opponent's cards will often counter out their own strategies, but all of this is generally just in the name of value, with a very sort of like generic value. So while that is definitely something that's really, really important, most decks need to have good value to like win. You need to be able to play multiple cards per turn. You need to be able to keep your hand full of cards and also like play cards for free off of other cards. That kind of stuff like really, really helps for consistent mid-range style strategies. But if you are trying to be like really, really specific with your deck build, Zhytrom is not necessarily going to fit that, particularly since he just like you don't always get to pick what you are looking for. On the other hand, there is a case where this gets a little bit more consistency, and that is when you are milling your opponent. If you are using a type of deck strategy that specifically mills your opponent, aka discards cards off the top of their deck and puts them into their void, then at that point the selection that Zhytrom gets from his summon ability, the play a unit or spell ability, really makes him a lot more worth it, because while the effect you are getting is going to be somewhat random and based on your opponent's card pool, if you are milling like 5, 10, 15 cards before you're playing Zhytrom, and like if it's a 5-cost card and you're playing a pretty heavy mill strategy, then you're pretty likely to be getting their deck down to a fairly significant amount of cards in their void. Once that happens, you now have your pick of basically all of your opponent's most dangerous cards. You will likely have a way to win the game or do something really, really exciting and very, very powerful off of Zhytrom just off of that. So in situations where you are aggressively milling your opponent, that's a really, really strong thing. This card does really well in control versus control matchups, since it can pick up a lot of the cards that are going to be the most significant in those particular scenarios. It can basically just play a lot of efficient value cards that are not going to be in your color. That's really, really strong and should not be should not be undersold. In addition, the card is reasonably healthy and does take like a little bit of effort to actually kill. It's not going to trade like less than a card for a card most of the time if your opponent just needs to destroy it with a removal spell. It's not going to trade on the board either. It's not providing you with a lot of like value in that particular respect. But if your concern is like who has the most removal spells, Zhytrom Twisted Mind is really, really good in that control versus control matchup. So that's something where you can actually get a lot of benefit out of that. Yeah, so this card's really, really interesting. I think it basically belongs in that sort of control versus control setup. It's good in Expedition in particular. I think it actually has a place in Throne as well, since Throne is a format where you exchange a lot of very high power cards, and Zhytrom gives you so much selection from those high power cards. You get to pick any spell or any unit, basically that only rules out relics, and it means that you are almost always likely to get something that is going to be a problem for your opponent, or even like help you dramatically against your opponent. So there are some really, really sweet things that you can grab off the guy, and then like basically like with the debt being like, debt is just not nearly as much of a cost as paying normal amounts of mana for a thing, and can often be a way to get yourself ahead in tempo. This is a great card to play at the end of your hand when you are just running out of stuff to do, and then taking some debt really doesn't feel that bad because you're likely to have a dead draw of a power card or something that doesn't really play that well, and Zhytrom just basically makes up for that, gives you a little bit more of a chance to draw something that's a little bit more substantial by playing something substantial with future profits. All of that, I think, leads to a really, really strong value control versus control card, something that plays pretty well in sort of mid-range, slower strategies, but is not particularly aggressive, and that's something that really needs to be noted due to the fact that the card does have some aggressive text on it. That +1, -1 again does actually end up being a little bit less useful considering how powerful the summon effect is and how little you're going to be using that +1, -1 on a fairly poorly statted unit with a fairly high price to pay. So keep in mind it's a mid-range to control bomb, but it's obviously really fun. Stealing things is always delightful. This is a really, really good steal card that happens to do a lot of really interesting things with its whole setup, and I think it's likely to be a strong value engine in many games to come. So really excited to see what people do with this. We're going to be trying to build something with it ourselves on Saturday. In addition, on Saturday, I should have mentioned, we're going to have a spoiler. We've graciously been provided one by Tempest Dragon King, so we are going to be talking about that on Saturday as well. Stay tuned. I believe I said 2 p.m. PST, so that'll be when the stream starts, and we'll probably do the spoilers around 4. All right, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely day with Zhytrom Twisted Mind, or a lovely week with Zhytrom Twisted Mind until the next promo comes out. This has been Eternal Card Breakdowns, and stay tuned for spoiler breakdowns on Saturday or Sunday. Cheers, everyone. Bye. Have a good one.